Princess Beatrice, the quiet royal once known for her loyalty, breaks in tears as shocking DNA results bring a life-altering truth. The report doesn't whisper, it confirms. Prince Andrew isn't her father. A daughter's devotion now collides with undeniable proof, and the monarchy faces a storm it cannot silence. The morning scandal explodes. It was early on Wednesday, May 21, 2025, when the storm began. Across London, the newspapers carried the same shocking headline in bold black print: Princess Beatrice is not Prince Andrew's daughter. By 7 a.m., every breakfast table in Britain had the story. Radio shows repeated it every hour, while television anchors paused mid-sentence, almost unable to believe the words they were reading. Social media boiled over. Within minutes, hashtags like Royal Scandal and Beatrice Truth were trending across Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Thousands of comments poured in, some in disbelief, others demanding answers. Outside royal residences, the atmosphere turned electric. Crowds gathered near Buckingham Palace and Windsor Castle, their voices mixing in confusion and anger. People shouted questions at security guards, but none were answered. "We want the truth," echoed across the gates. Journalists set up cameras in the pouring rain, waiting for a statement that never came. The palace's silence was deafening, and in that silence, the rumors only grew louder. What struck most people was how specific the report had been. It claimed sources close to the family had revealed the truth about Beatrice's parentage. No names were given, but the suggestion of inside knowledge was enough to set fire to every news channel. And yet, the royal household, usually quick to deny falsehoods, said nothing. That silence created a vacuum, and the vacuum was quickly filled with suspicion. The shocking part was the timing. Just as the royal family was trying to repair its image after years of scandals tied to Prince Andrew, this new revelation came like a hammer blow. For many, it felt too coordinated, too sudden to be random. People asked, who leaked this story? Why now? Some said it was a political distraction. Others whispered it came from within the palace walls. But while the nation argued, one person felt the full weight of the headlines. Princess Beatrice, now 36 years old, was at the center of the storm. She was not just a princess. She was a wife, a mother, a woman who had built a quiet, private life with her husband Edoardo Mapelli Mozzi and their daughter Sienna Elizabeth. For her, this was not gossip. It was her identity, her very blood, being questioned in front of the entire world. And as the chaos outside grew, inside Beatrice's own home, her walls began to close in. Curtains pulled, phones ringing, reporters shouting, and no word from the palace. The weight of uncertainty was unbearable. "Why aren't they saying anything?" she whispered to herself, pacing the room. That question marked the beginning of the storm inside her own heart, pushing her toward answers she never expected to find. Which leads us to what happened next, when Beatrice's shaken world could no longer be ignored. Beatrice's shaken world. Inside her home in St. James's, London, Princess Beatrice stood frozen as the cameras outside her gates zoomed in, trying to catch even the smallest glimpse of her face. The news had broken less than 4 hours ago, but already reporters filled the street. Microphones, bright lights, and strangers shouting her name turned her private sanctuary into a stage. Every window in the house was under siege. Her mind raced. This can't be true. It can't. But the silence from the palace only deepened her fear. She tried to pick up her phone, scrolled through her contacts, then set it down again. She opened drawers, pulled out old clippings, stared at them, then tossed them back in frustration. Nothing gave her clarity. She moved from window to window, the weight of the headlines crushing her. Finally, she called the one person she thought could bring calm, her mother, Sarah Ferguson. The line rang before Sarah's soft voice answered, "Yes, darling. I've seen it." Beatrice's voice cracked. "Mommy, what does it mean? Why are they saying this? Tell me it's not true." There was silence. Then Sarah whispered, "Beatrice, don't let them frighten you. You know the press, they invent stories. They want a scandal." But those words felt weak, powerless against the fury of a nation already convinced. Beatrice ended the call and felt her anger rise. She wasn't a child anymore. She was a mother herself. She couldn't just sit there while her identity was torn apart. So, without waiting, she slipped out quietly through the back garden, avoiding the reporters at the front. She got into her car and drove, fast but silent, toward Windsor. When she reached the familiar drive, she was stunned to see silence. No reporters, no crowds. Her parents had already cleared the scene. Inside the dining room, she found them waiting. Her voice was sharp, almost breaking. "Who exactly am I?" Her mother's hands trembled, but she answered firmly, "You are Beatrice, our first child, our daughter. That has never been in question." Andrew, stiff and uncomfortable, nodded, "Never. Don't let them tell you otherwise." But Beatrice wasn't convinced. She pushed, demanded, searched for certainty, but the answers she received only made her more uneasy. She left Windsor later that evening, calmer on the surface but deeply unsettled inside. Because the truth was simple. Photos and reassurances weren't enough anymore. She needed real proof, not words. And the storm that had started with a newspaper headline was now building into something far more dangerous. Something that would test not just her health, but her very place in the monarchy. And that brings us to the next part of the story. The sudden illness that changed everything. The confrontation at Windsor. The drive to Windsor Castle felt endless. Princess Beatrice gripped the steering wheel, her pulse racing faster with every mile. The scandal had been raging for less than 24 hours, but inside her chest, it already felt like a lifetime. By the time she arrived at her parents' residence near Windsor Great Park, the once busy grounds were strangely empty. No reporters, no crowds, just silence. Her parents had cleared the scene, keeping the truth safely hidden behind locked doors. Inside, the air was heavy. The dining room was dimly lit, the clock on the mantel ticking loudly, as though mocking the silence that surrounded her. Sarah Ferguson and Prince Andrew were seated at the long, polished table, waiting. Beatrice did not sit. She stood tall, her voice sharp, trembling yet steady enough to pierce the quiet. "Who exactly am I?" Her mother's hands clasped together tightly, her eyes locked on her daughter. Sarah's voice was calm but strained. "You are Beatrice, our first child, our daughter. That has never been in question." Her words were firm, but her face betrayed unease. Andrew shifted in his chair, his eyes refusing to meet hers. At last, he muttered, "Never doubt it. You are ours. Don't let them tell you otherwise." But Beatrice wasn't satisfied. For years, she had defended her father through endless storms, scandals, interviews, accusations. She had stood by him when the world turned against him. And now, with the headlines tearing her identity apart, all she wanted was one thing: proof. Not reassurances, not words. Proof. Sarah rose from her chair and brought out an old wooden box. She opened it carefully, laying out faded photographs. Beatrice as a baby, her first steps, her school uniform, smiling on her first day at Upton House School. "These are your memories," Sarah insisted. "This is your life. We have never lied to you, and we never will." The pictures were real. The memories were real. But Beatrice's heart still burned with doubt. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "Then why does it not feel enough? Why does it feel like something's missing?" The room grew quiet again. Andrew straightened, his face pale, and finally said, "We love you, Beatrice. That is the truth. Don't let the world steal that from you." It was the closest thing to comfort she would get. Hours later, she left Windsor, her parents' words echoing in her mind. On the surface, she looked calmer, but inside, the fire still raged. For the first time in her life, she doubted not just the press, but her own family. As she drove back to London, she had no idea the storm was only just beginning, because soon her body itself would betray her, forcing her into the very hands of doctors who would reveal more than she was ready to hear. And that leads us to the next chapter, the sudden illness that no one saw coming. The sudden illness. At first, it was easy to dismiss. Just a fever, Beatrice told herself. A few headaches, maybe exhaustion. After all, the stress of the scandal was enough to wear anyone down. She brushed it off for days, insisting to Edoardo Mapelli-Mozzi that she would be fine. But as the weeks passed, her strength began to fade. By June 2025, the symptoms worsened. Her face grew pale, her energy drained. Small bruises appeared across her arms, though she hadn't fallen or injured herself. Edoardo noticed quickly. One evening, as she lay on the sofa with a damp cloth on her forehead, he stood at the window, his voice firm but worried. "Bea, this isn't just tiredness. You need to see a doctor." She managed a faint smile, whispering, "Edo, I'll be fine. It's just a little fever. Tomorrow I'll be better." But tomorrow never came. By the end of that week, her fever still burned, the headaches sharpened, and she struggled to walk across the room without trembling. Edoardo's patience ended. On a gray morning, he walked into the bedroom, his voice leaving no room for debate. "We're going to the hospital today." "I'm not asking, Bea. I'm telling you. We're going now." Beatrice tried to protest, whispering softly, "Please, Edo," but he shook his head. "Enough. I won't risk it." And so, with their daughter Sienna Elizabeth, they drove to the London clinic, a hospital long trusted by the royal family. Security ushered them through a private entrance, away from cameras. Inside, doctors quickly admitted her. Dr. Carter, the attending physician, listened carefully as Edo explained the symptoms: fever that wouldn't break, pounding headaches, weakness. The doctor's expression was calm but serious. "These symptoms could point to many things," he said. "We need to run blood tests. It's important we find the cause quickly." Beatrice nodded, too weak to argue. Nurses drew blood, took her vitals, and placed her in a private ward. Hours turned into days, the fever lingering, the bruises spreading, her strength fading. The once lively princess, who only weeks before had been smiling at the school gates to pick up her daughter, now lay pale and exhausted in a hospital bed. And when the test results came back, the truth was even more terrifying than the scandal outside. Her blood counts were dangerously low. Her bone marrow was failing. And for Princess Beatrice, the fight for her life had just begun. Which brings us directly to the next devastating twist, the bone marrow crisis that exposed secrets no one could hide. The bone marrow crisis. The results were devastating. By the second week of June 2025, doctors confirmed what no one had expected. Princess Beatrice's bone marrow was failing. Her red cells, white cells, and platelets were all far below safe levels. It explained the constant fever, the bruises, the weakness. Without healthy marrow, her body could not fight infection or rebuild strength. The truth was simple and terrifying. She would not survive without urgent treatment. Dr. Carter explained it as gently as possible. Your marrow isn't doing its job. We need to replace it. That means a transplant. He paused, then added the words that left the room silent. The best chances for a donor come from your family, parents or siblings. We'll begin testing immediately. Beatrice swallowed hard, her voice trembling. And if they aren't a match? Dr. Carter nodded slowly. Then we widen the search. But first, we start at home. The very idea of relying on her parents for survival felt heavy, especially after the scandal. Still, there was no choice. Eduardo placed a firm hand on her shoulder, whispering, "You'll be fine, B. They'll match. They have to." The next morning, Sarah Ferguson and Prince Andrew arrived quietly through a private hospital entrance. They looked tense, their faces pale, but they agreed immediately to give blood. Sarah rolled up her sleeve without hesitation, smiling weakly at her daughter. "See, darling? Just a little pinch. Nothing to worry about." Andrew followed, jaw clenched, eyes fixed on the wall as the nurse filled vial after vial. Beatrice lay in her bed, watching, her heart pounding with fear. She had never needed her parents more than she did now. And yet, beneath her fear for her health, another storm brewed. The question she had been running from. What if the test showed more than compatibility? What if the rumors were true? The samples were sent off for analysis, with results expected in 3 days. Those days felt like years. Beatrice's body weakened further. She could barely walk from the bed to the bathroom. Every hour, nurses monitored her, taking temperature, blood pressure, oxygen levels. Ido stayed constantly by her side, reading softly to her and comforting their daughter Sienna in the quiet evenings. And then came the knock on the door. Dr. Carter entered with a file in his hand. His expression was solemn, his steps heavy. Everyone in the room held their breath. Which brings us to the shocking moment, the test that shook everything. The test that shook everything. When Dr. Carter opened the file, the air in the room froze. Beatrice sat up slightly, her pale face drained of what little color she had left. Sarah leaned forward, her hands pressed together, while Andrew stood rigid near the window. Dr. Carter's voice was calm but heavy. "We've run the compatibility tests. Neither your mother nor your father is a match." Silence, pure silence. Edo's voice broke first, sharp and urgent. "That's impossible!" "Test them again." The doctor shook his head. "We already did. Twice. The results are the same." Beatrice blinked in disbelief, her chest rising and falling quickly. "But they're my parents. How can neither of them match?" Her voice cracked as tears welled in her eyes. Dr. Carter spoke carefully, choosing every word. "I want to be clear. A lack of match does not automatically mean a lack of relation. Compatibility depends on specific genetic markers. Sometimes even close family members don't align. But the reassurance fell flat. The room was heavy with suspicion. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes glistening. Andrew's jaw tightened, his silence louder than words. For Beatrice, it was as though the walls of the hospital room were closing in. First the headlines, then the silence, then her illness, and now this. No match, no certainty. The very people who had sworn she was their daughter could not give her the one thing that might save her life. Ado reached for her hand, whispering, "Don't lose hope. There are registries, millions of donors. This isn't the end." But Beatrice wasn't thinking only of survival. She was thinking of the truth. The truth her parents wouldn't say out loud. The truth the headlines had screamed for weeks. For the first time, she dared to whisper the thought that had haunted her since the scandal broke. What if they really aren't my parents? Her illness was one battle. But now, another war had begun, one for her very identity. And in the quiet hours of the night, as machines beeped softly around her bed, Beatrice made a secret decision that would change everything: to demand a DNA test, no matter the cost. That decision takes us to the next chilling chapter, the secret DNA request that no one in the monarchy wanted her to make. The secret DNA request. The nights inside the London clinic were long, filled with the beeping of machines and the quiet shuffling of nurses. But for Princess Beatrice, the longest nights weren't because of the illness. They were because of the questions, the ones she could no longer silence. For days, she replayed Dr. Carter's words in her head. "Neither your mother nor your father is a match." The sentence rang like a bell she couldn't escape. If Andrew and Sarah couldn't even match genetically as potential donors, then what did that mean? Was it simply chance, as the doctor claimed, or was the truth darker? By the third night, Beatrice couldn't bear it anymore. She waited until the ward grew quiet, then called for Dr. Carter privately. He entered with his usual calm, but her tone was firmer than ever. "Doctor," she whispered, her voice tight, "I need the truth. I need a DNA test." Dr. Carter frowned, adjusting his glasses. "Princess, that's not protocol. We can't do that without consent from your parents. The hospital ... She cut him off, her eyes burning. "This isn't about protocol. It's about my life. I need to know who I am." For a long moment, he hesitated. Then, slowly, he nodded. Because the blood samples from Andrew and Sarah were still stored in the lab, the comparison could be done quietly, without raising alarms. "It will take 2 days," he said softly. "But once it's done, the truth may be harder to carry than you imagine." Beatrice looked him straight in the eye. "I've carried lies long enough." The next 48 hours were agonizing. She lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling, listening to the machines beep. Eduardo tried to comfort her, reading aloud, holding her hand, but she barely heard him. Her heart raced with fear and hope tangled together. Finally, on a gray morning, Dr. Carter returned. In his hand was a sealed envelope. His expression was guarded, his steps slow. He handed it to her without a word. Beatrice's fingers trembled as she held it. She didn't open it right away. She stared at the envelope, her chest heaving, her lips whispering, "This could change everything." And she was right. Because when the seal broke, the truth inside would shatter not only her world, but the very foundation of the monarchy. That moment leads us directly to the heartbreaking twist, the shattering revelation. The shattering revelation. The envelope shook in Beatrice's hands. She sat upright in her hospital bed, her breath shallow, her fingers trembling as she pulled the folded paper free. Eduardo sat beside her, his hand gripping hers tightly. Her parents, Sarah Ferguson and Prince Andrew, stood a few feet away, waiting in uneasy silence. Beatrice unfolded the page, her eyes scanning the words that would destroy everything she had believed for 36 years. The result was clear, written in black and white. No biological match. Her world crumbled. Tears spilled instantly as she cried out, "It's true! It's true, isn't it? You're not my parents!" Sarah gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Andrew turned sharply away, his shoulders stiff, his face collapsing under the weight of the moment. The silence was suffocating until Beatrice's voice rose, broken and furious. "For all these years, you let me live a lie. Every memory, every smile, it was all built on something false." Sarah's voice cracked, trembling. "Beatrice, we were only trying to protect you. You were so young. It was complicated. We thought it was best." "Best?" Beatrice cried out, sobbing openly. "You thought lying to me about who I am was best?" Andrew finally turned, his composure shattered. His voice was low but heavy with guilt. "We did what we believed was right. But we never stopped loving you. That's the truth." But the words couldn't heal her. Beatrice shook her head violently, clutching the paper in her hands. "Love doesn't erase lies. You've stolen my truth from me. For 36 years, I defended you. I carried your name proudly. And all along, you hid who I really am." Her sobs echoed in the sterile hospital room. No titles, no crowns, no royal protection could soften the blow of betrayal. For Beatrice, the monarchy itself felt like a prison of secrets. That night, long after her parents had left the ward in silence, Beatrice sat with Eduardo. Her eyes were red, her voice flat. "I'm done," she whispered. "Done with the lies, done with pretending. Whatever the truth is, I will find it. But I will never forgive them for hiding it from me." Edo tried to comfort her, his hand brushing hers. They loved you in their way. Don't let this break you." But her mind was already made up. The DNA results were not just a medical report. They were a death sentence for trust. And from that moment on, Princess Beatrice's life, her place in the royal family, and her loyalty to her parents would never be the same. And so the world was left reeling with a haunting question. If Andrew wasn't her father, then who was? The aftermath of betrayal. The DNA test was more than a medical report. It was a wound that tore Princess Beatrice apart. The paper in her trembling hands confirmed what the press had whispered for weeks. Prince Andrew was not her father. For 36 years, she had defended him through scandals in 2019, 2020, and 2022. She had carried her family's shame in silence, raised her daughter Sienna Elizabeth with dignity, and stood by Andrew when the world turned away. Now, every smile in old photographs felt poisoned. "I stood by them," she whispered bitterly to Eduardo, "and all this time they lied to me." Edo tried to console her. They still loved you." But her tear-swollen eyes hardened. "Love doesn't erase lies. I'll never see them the same way again. In the days that followed, Andrew and Sarah Ferguson visited quietly, but she kept her distance. Even in illness, she built walls between them. Outside, speculation raged. What did this mean for Beatrice's title, her future in the royal family? Inside, whispers spread among hospital staff. This betrayal was not private, it was public. Beatrice confided to Eduardo, her voice firm, "I'm done with the lies. Done with the palace. Done with pretending the quiet princess had broken her silence. And once broken, there was no going back." The bigger question. The revelation left Beatrice shattered, but also opened a mystery the world couldn't ignore. If Andrew wasn't her father, then who was? Rumors swirled of an affair in the 1980s, a secret donor, or even a palace cover-up. The monarchy stayed silent, just as it had in May 2025, fueling conspiracy. Crowds demanded answers, but none came. Behind closed doors, Beatrice whispered to Eduardo, "I'll find out." Sienna deserves the truth. Her determination was clear. She would uncover what had been buried for decades.
And the haunting question remained, if the monarchy could hide this for 36 years, what else are they hiding still?
The DNA proof shattered Beatrice's world, but left a deeper mystery. Who is her real father? Rumors swirl, questions multiply, yet the palace remains silent. For Beatrice, trust is broken forever. And for the monarchy, the secret buried for 36 years may only be the beginning of darker revelations.